Let me say good morning to all of you. Thank you for joining us this morning. I guess I should begin with dedicating today to my wife. Today's meeting is dedicated to my wife. We're celebrating 42 years today, so have a big day. So thank you. So it's
What a
obviously this
great
is
way
the
to
first
spend an
of a
anniversary.
yeah. We have the first of a couple of meetings coming up within the board, and obviously today I can say we mark it. We're 10 days away from our next board meeting, and we're 11 days away from J Summit and coming together, the convening of our movement. And I'm happy to report that actually as of yesterday, we're at 315 paid registrants from representing 86 JCCs. And so from that number, with our presenters, our sponsors, partners, volunteers, and our team, we're going to be gathering approximately 400 people for the first lay leadership and professional gathering of the JCC movement since 2018. So under our beloved Lisi Gottdenker's dedicated efforts in putting this thing together, we will come together, and we're very excited about doing that. But today is not about that. Today is about really a task at hand, and another thing that's going back really almost about a year since we first started working on it, and that is this stakeholder paradigm thing. A lot of thought, a lot of meaning, a lot of input has been put forth with our consultants and the fine leadership of Sandy Carden. And so it's really my pleasure today on September 5th to turn it over to Sandy, who's going to frame up our conversation for today. And we will look for your input and engagement with that. So Sandy, all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, David. Happy anniversary. And let me just start, as always, with a huge thanks to everyone who's been involved in this process, starting with you, David, and the support that you've given us. Jen and Michael and the whole team, JCCA team, who's just been phenomenal. And I can't, as I've said each time, I can't say enough about Michael for having stepped up into the various roles that he's taken on throughout this very long and challenging, arduous, difficult year, both within, in many respects, both within our movement and certainly outside. And I know all of us are still reeling from the events of last weekend, dealing with it both through our JCCs and in our own ways. And I know that our hearts and our souls are with everyone, the rest of the beloved Jewish people in the state of Israel, as we move through these darkest of days, which somehow managed to get worse, just when you think it couldn't possibly happen that way. But rather than focus on the negative, I want to start even before I get to what we're doing, because I see down in the lower left-hand corner of my screen, I see Sam Cohen. And I just want to say that, Sam, I was unable to participate in any of the activities this summer, but from everything I heard, you, as always, did an extraordinary job. And we can't thank you enough for keeping sort of the hallmark of the JCC movement and the JCCs going. So thank you, Sam, so much for you and your team and the incredible work that you did. We really appreciate it. And I think it's those kinds of things that leave us in the strong position we're in to move into this next phase, to think about the stakeholder paradigm and to bring to J Summit our latest thinking on how this should work. And that's what this meeting is really all about. This meeting isn't about deciding the specifics of this. This is to share with the board the really hard work, the thought, the input from hundreds of people at every level of the organization to think about how best we can do this. And the timing, while difficult for us, actually presented us some opportunities, because I think it gave people the freedom to be a little more honest and a little more transparent with us than they might have been in other circumstances. And I want to applaud everyone who participated in this process, who took the time individually on the planning committee, on the board, whatever it may be, to help us work through this, because this is a complicated issue. It's an issue that's been around our movement for years and years and years. We're hoping that what we've done this time is the work that's necessary to lay the foundation to fix this, if not once and for all, at least in a way that we will not have to revisit the fundamentals, the basic principles again. It may be the details of this need to be revisited, like so many decisions, every year or every other year, whatever it may be, since we're a dynamic movement. But what we're really trying to do is come up with a plan that will stand us in good stead for the foreseeable future. A way to think about these issues, to the way to think about the relationships that JCCA has with the JCCs and the JCCs have with each other. I don't want to spend a lot of time framing it. I do want to remind everyone that we had a basic principle as we worked through this at the planning committee of what we call the 4 Ps. We wanted to focus on the partnership, people, programs and business, and promotion. And by that, what we mean is, in the first is a partnership. What's the nature of the relationship between the JCCA and all of the JCCs? And how can we facilitate greater partnerships between and among the individual JCCs, as well as the movement and the JCCs and the broader Jewish world? That's what we mean by a partnership in its most broadest context. Second is people. What can and should JCCA be doing to invest in the people of the JCCs, to strengthen our movement professionally, to strengthen our lay leadership, and to otherwise engage people in all the incredible work that we're doing in local communities and around the country, and indeed through JCC Global internationally. Third is the third P of programs and businesses. What can JCCA be doing to strengthen the programming and the business of the various JCCs? Where can we provide greatest assistance, be of most help, and again, build those collaborations? And finally, the final P for us is promotion. How is it that the JCCA can really tell the story of the JCC movement? How can we impress upon the broader world, philanthropists and others, what incredible things are taking place in JCCs all over the world? And in fact, with help, how can we knit those things together to really move the Jewish people forward in 2024 and beyond? And at a time when the fragmentation, of the Jewish people has never been a bigger problem, or potentially, larger problem. So partnership, people, program, promotion, that's where we focused our attention as a general rule. And what I'd like to do now is introduce Jeff and Carol and Brian, our incredible consultants with whom you all have met before, who did an incredible job in working with us under circumstances that no one anticipated when they were originally engaged. They went above and beyond by all sorts of means. It is absolutely the most impressive and enjoyable consulting arrangement in which I've ever been involved in any way, and I can't thank the three of them enough. And I think when we're through this process and we reach the end goal of this meeting, I think you'll share that same feeling with me and be extraordinarily thankful for their shepherding of us through this process and the way that they've helped us think about it, and will continue to help us think about it as we move through towards final resolution, first presenting this at J Summit and then the ultimate resolution of it. So without further ado, Brian, Jeff, Carol, thank you, and walk us through what we've been doing and where we can go.
Awesome. Sandy, thank you for that generous introduction. And we are excited to have this opportunity to share our committee's emerging conclusions with the board. Michael, thank you for adding the slides. I would also ask, just for some technical reason, I was not able to log in on my computer. So if you could just give me a heads up, Michael, on the chat. It's difficult for me to access the chat on the phone. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. And one more. Perfect. So we sent to the board a series of background slides a few days ago that you've probably seen before. I think you saw it at the May meeting. That really sets the stage for the committee's recommendations. We had a lot of input, as you saw in those slides, over the course of many months from a wide variety of stakeholders. Sandy alluded to those in his opening comments. And the committee took that input and assembled recommendations in 3 areas, as you see depicted on this slide. And I'm going to introduce these in a counterclockwise fashion. So starting at noon at the top of this image, we have a series of recommendations related to the work of the association on behalf of the movement. Sandy gave you a preview of what that's going to look like with his introduction of the 4 Ps. So we'll talk about that in a few minutes, but in many ways, that's a way to structure exactly how the association moves the field forward. It represents an affirmation of some things that are in place. It represents a fine tuning and a change in other areas. Going down to the bottom left of this image, once we achieve a greater alignment between the association or among the association and the field, we want to stay in that state, stay in a highly aligned position with the field. So the second area of recommendations is about how we stay in that spot. Systems for keeping the field and the association well connected and well aligned. The third piece of the puzzle in the bottom right is a revenue model, a new revenue model for the association. As we think about evolving the way that the association advances the field and collaborates with the field, I think it's only natural that we think about, at the same time, the best way to align our revenue model to work in a sustainable way with that vision. So we will touch on each of these 3 areas in our next few minutes together. Go ahead, Michael, with this next slide. Okay, so the 4 Ps, that Sandy mentioned in his opening remarks. I think of these as containers, as categories, if you will, that describe the work of the association on behalf of the field. I think Sandy did a nice job of introducing these, so I'm not gonna read the slide to you, but just in terms of a quick overview of the 4 areas in partnership, you're gonna see and hear elements of how the association really creates a platform for the field to move forward, creating a connection among the various actors in the field. In people, that's clearly about how we advance and develop both our lay and professional talent. In program and in business, you'll see reference to ways in which the association strengthens the field as separate, independent 501c3s. So how do we help the businesses of JCC and the programs of JCCs become even more vibrant and sustainable in the years to come? And lastly, in the promotion column, we see the importance of the association and telling the story of the movement to the world at large and the philanthropic community. So I think let me do one more slide and then let's pause and take some questions on this. So if we go one more slide, within each of those 4 categories, our committee brainstormed at an earlier meeting what success looks like. And you can see certain elements of what we're striving for within each of the 4 categories. So I mentioned the notion of a platform under the headline of partnership, a platform for Jewish engagement on a continental level. In the people column, you see references to having a strong pipeline of lay and professional talent. In program and business, you'll see reference to the association really being an engine of innovation and collaboration across the field, uncovering new and meaningful ways to generate revenue, new and meaningful ways to save costs. And then in promotion, again, you see the notion of telling our story and helping advance the brand or awareness of our work throughout the field at large. So let me pause there. And again, recognizing that we're still in that value proposition zone and we're talking about sort of the rough outlines of the work of the association. Let's see if there are questions or comments so far. Okay.
Can I ask a question?
Please, of course.
Yeah, hi, it's Lauren Goldstein from Toronto. I would like to see more emphasis on the program and business on measurement, because I think that's what folks that I've talked to want to be able to use the JCC community and the JCC professionals to measure what they're doing in their key areas. And, you know, you can include camping, daycare, right across the board. And I don't think I see that there.
Okay, appreciate that.
Thank you.
Other reactions, suggestions?
Well, I think we could certainly put that in the program line. Yeah, easily to do that as part of what we see as, you know, helping in programming.
Agree.
I have one more suggestion or idea. It's Sue Straight from Milwaukee. Just that we don't have a place in here that suggests that JCCA professionals will be actually interacting with JCCs individually in their boards. And even though we're going to connect our professionals, it would be wonderful to have more face time with JCCA professionals or JCCA representatives in the JCCs themselves, so that they get a feel for who it is that's providing what services and who they can talk to when they need guidance in some of the important areas to in agency leadership.
Okay, good suggestion. Well, actually, I think we'll get a little closer to that too a little later when we talk about possible structures for partnership between the field and the association. So thank you for that suggestion.
Yeah, we might also, Susan, we might also be able to put something, Brian and others, on in the promotion category, because this issue has come up a lot, that we need to help our lay leadership, our local lay leadership, understand the value of JCCA much better than they do today. So it's not we're not putting our execs in a position of having to explain us. Ideally, we'd like to have our lay leadership, right, say, how come we're not doing more at the JCCA? That's how we love to flip the script. And so I think maybe adding something specific about that promotion that would make good sense for us.
Very good.
This is Fran in Minneapolis. I'm interested under the partnerships in the educating non-Jewish JCC participants about the Jewish community. I think we could use more data about what the split is, but that we also parse the Jewish community into its many different parts and see which constituencies within the Jewish community are served more or less than others, so that the dialogue is both within and among. And I don't think we've seen data that probably has already been collected by many locals, but not necessarily put together in a whole picture.
Okay. Good point, and speaks to JCCs as a welcome space and place for Jews of all backgrounds in the community. So it makes sense. Any other early comments or questions on?
I think Zach has a
4Ps?
question and Jay has a question.
Okay. Yeah,
We were
sorry, I
asked
can't see.
to raise our hands, so those of us who are rule followers have put our hands.
You'll never get a word in that way, Zach.
Seriously, I didn't realize it was a group of Jews. What was I thinking? Thank you, Michael. Anyway, a couple of things. First of all, I love the 4Ps. Sandy, Brian, I don't know who came up with that, but I often do my own thinking around people, place, purpose, and purse. So I have a different set of 4Ps. But when I think of the purpose, which I feel like might not be here, at least I'm not seeing it, Brian. But I'm missing the big overall trends, the kind of when you talk about our picture of success, isn't part of what we're doing trying to strengthen Jewish community. I don't really see the goal here of helping create a next generation of proud, strong Jews, and those who are Jewish allies, helping. Like at the end of the day, we have 180 JCCs on the continent. We've heard Daron's talking points over and over again about the 1.5 million, but in this moment, we need to be thinking about how we're doing more, I think, to instill Jewish pride and to create a next generation of Jewish community that's strong and resilient. And I'm just not seeing that in here somewhere.
Yeah. Zach, maybe the best place to tackle that, at the top of slide 4, there's a statement that the association works in concert with and behalf of JCCs to move our field forward. We could unpack what it means to move the field forward, and perhaps capture some of the notions capture some of the notions that you're talking about, like building on that introductory statement, because to your point, I think it probably is above the 4 Ps.
Yeah, and I would just not be coy in this moment. Moving the field forward is, internal jargon that, like, let's just be out there right now in this moment. We have to be out there. So I'll just pause. Thank you.
Fair point. Fair point. Okay, Jay's hand. Now I see Jay's hands up.
Yeah. Thanks, Brian. So just one thing that I noticed when I was looking, and it may be coming up later, but when Sandy and when I've heard the partnership P described before, the number one thing that I hear when I hear it described without this slide is, that the association's role in both strengthening the partnership between the association and the field, and strengthening the partnerships among the field. And I'm not saying it's built into a lot of the bullet points all over the slide, but when I read the column of partnership, it seems disconnected from what I generally think that column means and the way Sandy described it in the intro. So I'm not saying any of those 3 things are wrong. I just think there needs to be a little bit more of the overall theme that flows through it than I think is currently on this slide.
I just want to add that this stakeholder process was not about creating a strategic plan with specific goals and priorities. It actually, I think, will feed nicely into a strategic planning process down the road. And I think a lot of the questions that are in the chat actually relate to that next step, right? This was about how do we now kind of focus our work and align with the needs of the field, and how do we move that forward? So it was a little bit narrower a framework than kind of a overall strategic goal setting and vision process.
Jane has her hand up. It's just I think you get this comes across the chart, but I know that from my J, what I hear most, what they value and what they miss when they don't get it, is the sharing among professionals in the same positions across the board. You get at it because you talk about regional gatherings, you talk about cohort learning, you talk about library of best practices, but library seems, I know it's wrong to say this, a little more stagnant, or where you can go if you need it, but maybe maybe I was thinking where you could put in expanding access or vehicles for sharing among the J's. Again, it comes across in the whole thing, but to me, that's one of the most important things I think our J gets, is their networking with the other J professionals and what they miss when they don't get it. You're on mute, Brian.
Okay. Am I back?
Yes.
Woo, it's a lot of stress doing this on my phone. Okay, so let's keep going, and some of maybe some additional questions or comments may come up as we proceed here. So within each of the 4 Ps, earlier this summer, we assembled subcommittees comprised of um, our main committee as well as board executives to start brainstorming. How do we get closer in each of these 4 pillars? How do we get closer to the picture of success that we were just looking at? What are some of the action items that we should consider? And I think, that we didn't give the committees like tons and tons of time. They had they had an opportunity to meet live once, and we traded some emails. So I would encourage us all to think about this list as directionally correct, but not totally exhaustive of all of the good ideas. So, excuse me. For that reason, I'm not going to dive into the details of each bullet point, but I hope that the board takes away that we're primed with ideas for how we get from where we are today to our desired future in each of the 4 areas. And Michael, if you go one more slide, I want to draw attention to the comment on the bottom of this page, which is that, probably no surprise to most board members is doing some of the things that are listed on these last 2 slides is going to take some resources. And as an association, we need to think about what is the best way to move forward? What are the trade-offs that we might be willing to make? Adjusting resources, bets that we can grow resources, reallocating resources in order to be able to tackle some of the points that emerged from the subcommittees. And at least a tool that we are proposing that we use to help us with those trade-offs and those decisions is what we're calling a strategy screen. And that's introduced on the next slide. Michael, if you want to go one more slide. The idea here would be that we take a fresh look at all of the different efforts of the association today. You can think of those as enumerating the programs that are on the vertical axis listed on this table. On the horizontal axis, you see 6 criteria that in some we should be able to objectify, at least in some ways, for some of these variables to help us make as objective decisions as we can about the best path forward for the various programs and which are most meaningful, most effective for us advancing towards the picture of success that we looked at a few slides ago. So the idea here is step 1 is populate the matrix. Step 2 is based on the ratings of each program, explore the best path forward. And you see those listed in bullets at the bottom of the slide. There may be some programs that we say, wow, this is totally on point. Perfect scores on all 6 areas. We should invest and grow that particular effort. Some of them maybe are fine as is. And then some of them, maybe we decide that we're best. Maybe it made sense for the association to do it 5 years ago, 10 years ago, 20 years ago, but now there are other entities that could do it even better with whom we could collaborate. So that's the idea of outsourcing. And then there may be some that, that the time has passed and something was a need 10 years ago, but it's really not. It doesn't make the list of the most important ways that we can advance towards our desired future now. All right. So those are 4 paths. They're probably not mutually exclusive, they're not exhaustive rather. But those are 4 paths for the programs that are listed on the bottom of the slide. Let me introduce one more slide, and then again we can pause, and then I'm going to call on Jeff. But if you go one more slide, thank you, Michael. We're acknowledging here that strategy screening process is going to be tough work. It's not going to be easy. I'm going to highlight a couple of points in particular on this slide, starting with the second bullet. As someone that's been working in the field, at least from a distance, for a couple of decades, I've certainly experienced that there are a wide variety of opinions on these programs, depending upon where the J finds itself. Sometimes J's that are smaller see programs differently than large J's. Sometimes suburban J's see things different than urban J's, or J's with new execs see things different than very tenured execs. So, as we do that rating and as we think about what to do with the programs, we're going to have to wrestle with the reality that there are a wide variety of perspectives on the work of the association. And to the third point, at least in my opinion, all the easy answers are gone. In some respects, we've been wrestling with this question of the best ways to advance our vision for some time. So we're going to have to make some it's likely that we will have to make some tough choices. So we're calling out the importance of, frankly, just some leadership courage and resolve as we do this work. Resolve to make some of the tough decisions that unlock our ability to get to the next level. Okay. So what we've covered thus far, if you remember that triangle picture from earlier in the presentation, is we're talking about how we enhance the value proposition of the association with the field and how we bring the work of the association into greater alignment with what the field values. In a second, I want to turn things over to Jeff to talk about how we stay in alignment once we've made some of these enhancements. But again, let me pause here and let's take questions and comments on the last few slides.
Fran's got her hand up.
I'm quite interested in your second bullet here about the, in red, wide variety of perspectives from the field, because I see this as a variation on states' rights, and that is that locals have priorities in certain ways that is not necessarily the continental view.
Mhm.
And since, as Michael mentioned, we have not done what I think is essential, and that is strategic planning, I'm concerned that we get locked into voting on 1 to 3 or 1 to 6 of programs without giving enough porous nature to these buckets for the individuality of the local perspectives. Because the variety, as you just said, big and small and lends to enormous variation, where the most popular may be irrelevant for a minority number of Jays, and they shouldn't be penalized for that or not receive resources because of that. And I think we need to be more subtle in how we look at this than is presently outlined here. And I'm just cautioning absolute voting when we don't yet have all the variables we really need.
Yeah, you're totally right. When we get to the ways in which we're thinking about offering JCCs the opportunity to partner with or connect with the association and their colleagues in the field, you'll see we are proposing some choice. In the past, there's been one way. I mean, for the most part, right? There's been one way to connect in with the association. We would like to explore some choice, and I think that'll get, at least in part, Fran, to what you're talking about. JCCs will be able to select the path that best suits what they want to take. But that may or may not be sufficient to address the wide variety of needs in the field that you're identifying.
Yeah, Fran, I think you're talking about the distinction between depth and breadth, right? There are programs that many JCCs participate in at some level, and there are other programs that fewer JCCs participate in much more deeply and may view as much higher value. And as we go through this process, we're going to have, it's a balancing act that JCCs go through with their own programs, and it's a balancing act that we're going to have to navigate as well. And we need to be conscious of that as we think about this.
And you guys know this. We have to guard against the association being pulled too thin by its many stakeholders. Our natural inclination is to, serve as much of the need and interest as we can, but we are one entity at the end of the day. So we will have to, I anticipate that we will have to make some choices about what we think our role is and where we can work with others.
Ready for the next section?
Yeah, let's do it. Jeff, you want to take it away?
Sounds good. Thank you, Brian. You can hear me okay?
Yep.
All right. So first off, I just want to say it's a pleasure to see all of you again. I had the opportunity to present in front of many of you in New York City back in May. I'm also excited to go to J Summit and see all of you again in person. So it's just been a real privilege to be part of this entire process and see how far we've been able to take it. And I'm excited to see where it goes next. I'm not going to read all the words that are on this slide. I think what this really talks about is a major theme that came out from all the interviews that Brian and I conducted over the course of the last year, which is this word alignment. And I think even a stronger word is reflection. If you think about any umbrella organization and its relationship to whatever they call them, affiliates, chapters, the field, you want to see the reflection in each other. When the umbrella organization, the association is sending out communications, people in the field should feel like, I like what I'm seeing there. It makes sense with what I'm trying to do. When a particular J is putting out a program, the association say that makes a lot of sense with what the umbrella organization is trying to drive. And so I think when the priorities are aligned, when you see in each other that you're in sync, when the association sees things the field are working on and vice versa, all seem to make sense with each other, that's when everything has this like beautiful flow. And that theme came out loud and clear in everybody that we spoke to, this feeling of, wow, we really could achieve some unbelievable things if we were all rowing in the same direction and being on the same team. So this slide is really just meant to be 5 principles or tenets of what it would mean to have that alignment over the long term to ultimately elevate the movement. Okay, next slide, Michael. And so we identified really 4 constituencies that are part of this ongoing feedback loop that all need to be working in sync for things to go particularly well. So starting with the association, they're trying to really thread the needle of providing services out to the field that are valued while also being this strategic organization that can see things going on because they're looking at a national scale that maybe a particular J can't see. So when the association is firing on all cylinders, they're doing both at the same time, providing services and also seeing things that maybe a particular J hasn't noticed. At the same time, the JCCs, they have a series of priorities that are important to them, and they're bubbling those up to the association. And if the association is listening and looking to be in alignment, they're listening for what the vast majority of Js are saying are important to them and trying to provide things that meet those needs. Again, they'll never get to a point where what they're doing is going to be appreciated by 100% of the Js. And we just talked about that, and Fran, I think, was getting a lot of why that may be. But in general, the things that the association is working on should be in alignment with the vast majority of what's important for Js. At the same time, Js can be investing in the movement and seeing things that the association is working on and talking about that maybe aren't benefiting their particular J specifically, but you see that what they're doing is for the good of all. And maybe it's going to benefit a particular J 2 or 3 years down the road, but therefore it's still a worthwhile investment. So that's also kind of the double role that a particular J can play. The board executives, we realized throughout this process, are really the ultimate bridge between the association and the field, because that's the subset of folks that are really sitting in both worlds. They have access to a particular J's where they're working or a particular region that they're involved in, but they're also at all these conversations where the association is talking strategically and big picture. And so there's a major opportunity for the board execs to really be the translating voice between what's going on in the field, what the association is talking about, and keeping that alignment in sync. And ultimately, if all 3 of those stakeholders are doing their job, the partners and funders, we would hope, would be lining up to want to get involved and invest in what the association or particular Js are trying to do. If you remember back in May, one of the things we presented was that we met with a bunch of partners and funders who said they would love to do more with the association, with the Jays. They just want to feel like everybody's rowing in the same direction, has their alignments, has their priorities aligned. And when that happens, those conversations will be a lot clearer, because you can come to these funders and partners with very specific things that you're looking to do, and the wherewithal to say, if you invest in us, we can roll this out at a large scale. All right, continuing on, Michael. So we started to look at some more specific, I would say, a layer down of recommendations of the kind of things that the association and the Jays can be doing together to stay in alignment. And some of these I noticed came up already when Brian was presenting his part of the presentation, as a bunch of you were raising your hands. First and foremost, resources. It doesn't necessarily mean that the association is going to provide an actual consultant or resource to solve an issue or a problem that a particular Jay has mentioned. In fact, interestingly, we talked about in a lot of our interviews, many people would say, whatever happened to the consultants? Why don't you have the consultants anymore? But if we would ask a question, did you value the work that was being done by them? We got a lot of answers all across the board. So we kind of evolved the thinking there to, it may not be that there's a consultant who actually comes in and does the work for a particular J, but certainly they should be able to point you in the right direction of another J that's already done what you're trying to do, or a resource that's out there that you could be hiring as well. Secondly, best practice is the association is in an unbelievable seat to be able to look at what's going on in particular regions and notice when something that's great in one place could be rolled out in another place, and for sure should be playing the role of getting that information out to other folks who would benefit from it in an efficient and helpful way, like just in time for when it's important to particular JCCs. By leaps and bounds, I would say gatherings was one of the most common things mentioned by the people we spoke to. We spoke to well over 100 people, that not just J Summit, but all the opportunities, both nationally, regionally, to get people together who are in similar roles, who are doing similar things, who are trying to solve similar problems, is extremely beneficial. And the association is in a great position to get those people together because they're talking to all of them. The fourth one, the evolution of the board executive roles, I spoke about on the last slide. And finally, impact. Again, this came up in the interviews, that at board meetings at each of the JCCs, there's always someone who raises their hand at one particular board meeting and says, I see this line item of what we're paying every year to the association. Can you remind me, why do we pay that every year? What are we getting for it? Is this not something that we can consider either reducing, or do we even need to pay it at all? And we realize the association should play their role in helping people who have to answer that question have right in front of them the impact that the association is making. That we would love that answer to be, the number you see there is actually a bargain. Look at all these things that we're getting. You wouldn't believe how much services, how much value we're getting from this amount that we're paying. So we're gladly writing that check every year. And the association can arm the people who have to answer that question with the actual information through some kind of impact report, so you can see exactly what's going on year over year. Okay, one more slide. So just to get a little bit more specific about what the role of the board executives could be going forward, and I'm hoping nobody takes this slide to mean the folks that are on the Zoom are not doing their job today. What we're talking about is enhancing the role and getting even more value of the unique nature of where a board exec sits by the fact that they have access to the association and to local JCCs. So the main thing is in that second bullet, facilitate two-way communications. The fact that we did all these interviews and there was this feeling that there was a lack of alignment, a lack of being in sync among the JCCs and the association, tells you that there's such an unbelievable role for the board execs to play when they feel like it's starting to move off of that alignment, to immediately bubble that back up to the association and say, we're starting to hear things within the field and things can get tackled before they ever get out of hand. And I think when that role starts happening, and I think it will happen going forward, because all these meetings we've been having back in May, today, J Summit, I think there's this realization of this unique role that the board execs can play. And so I think we're excited to see where that can head. And it may even lead to some kind of special committee, as you see in the bottom, that would tackle this very type of work. So I think, Michael, Brian, that kind of covers the highlights of what I wanted to go through on these slides, if there are any questions.
Great. Questions or comments on this section? All right, shall we continue? So anchoring back to that original graphic, the landscape of our recommendations, we've talked about the association's value proposition. We talked about our thoughts on how we stay in alignment with the field. Now let's talk about the third puzzle piece, which is the revenue model of the association. So, as we think about the adjustments to the way that the association works with the field, and as we think about literally the concept of value proposition, I think it calls us to consider exactly how does the financial relationship between the association and the field follow this new direction that is emerging. There's also some important practicalities, which I probably don't even have to mention to the board, but just to name them very quickly, as we think about the financial deficit that the association has been wrestling with, and as we think about putting the organization on a path towards a balanced budget, naturally, we need to be able to forecast in some way what our revenue streams, both earned and contributed, will be. What is the resource pool from which we might be able to implement the programmatic suggestions, the programmatic recommendations that we looked at back up in the value proposition section. So we actually have two possible approaches that we would like to share with the board and get some feedback on. And we'll talk about exactly what we take to, we have a few options in terms of how we can share this more broadly at JSummit. But Michael, let's go ahead and go to the next slide, which introduces the first of our two options. So, naturally we had many objectives as we think about our revenue model options. Here are just two important ones. Number one, we would like to be connected, to stay connected with as many JCCs as possible. When you go back to our 4 Ps and you think about partnership and you think about platform, there is true strength in numbers. So as I say, one objective is to certainly stay connected to as many J's as possible. The other objective, obviously, is we do need to generate some revenue for the association to fund its work. So this scenario, this option one, this 2-tier model, naturally has 2 levels. The affiliate level provides fairly basic connectivity to the association. It enables JCCs, as you see in the 3rd row of this table, to join most of our conferences, participate in many but not all programs, but to do so on a fee for service or a standard pricing arrangement. Okay, so that affiliate level provides basic access without any discount, without any bundle. The partner level, the JCC Plus partner level, the right column, more closely approximates probably our traditional sense of what it means to connect with and affiliate with JCC Association. So to fully participate in our programs, to be able to access our signature programs like Maccabi, to be able to participate in our granting programs, to be able to benefit from consultations from JCCA team members, JCCs would have to participate at the JCC Plus partner level. Okay, so hold that in your thinking, and let's go one more slide, Michael, and introduce the other option. Remember, I said there were 2 options we were considering. That last slide obviously is a 2-tiered model. What we're looking at on this slide is a 3-tiered model. Okay, so the affiliate model is basically the same in this scenario. And in many ways, the JCC Plus partner is the same here. We are introducing a 3rd level, the leader level, which is in the darker green at the far right of this table, that provides even more value or even more benefits to the relationship between the JCC and JCC Association. Naturally, that leader level will come at a higher price point. It is our intention to be able to offer the JCC Plus level, that middle level, at a price point that is lower than the pre-pandemic levels, and the leader level is closer to the traditional pricing. So when I mentioned earlier in the call that we wanted to create some optionality or some choice points for JCCs, this three-tiered model provides obviously more choice for the JCCs to select the way that they would like to connect with and benefit from being a part of the association and being connected with their peers. Let's go one more slide. Let's go two more slides just to introduce the overall pricing, and then let's pause and talk about these two structures. But I think the pricing probably will help round out everyone's perspective here. I would encourage us to stay at a relatively conceptual level as we look at these two price points. There are loads of details to be worked out that we just haven't gotten to. As I say, I think it would benefit us to stay, mostly at a conceptual level. So in the two-tiered model, this shows you our initial hypotheses on how we would price this. Okay, the two columns on the right, okay, the percentage of operating revenue and the reference to the JCCs that we're paying at this level prior to the pandemic, give you some sense of how to evaluate how these fees, these dues, would correspond to what JCCs might have become accustomed to prior to the pandemic. Okay, so as you look at the percent of operating revenue and you see those ranges, in the olden days, I think we were benchmarking ourselves at roughly 1% of operating revenue. So obviously, these fees come in at less than that. Okay. So let's go one more slide just to show you how the three-tier model would work, and then, as I say, let's pause for comments and questions. So the price points here for the leader level at each size, of course, are at a premium to the JCC Plus level. Okay, so I'm referencing the third column versus the fourth column. Again, as a helpful reference, you can see the number of JCCs that were investing in JCC Association at these various levels back in 2020. Okay, so I had for most of these levels, for most of these size levels, we had a preponderance of JCCs that were already, if you will, already at the leader level. Okay, so when you think about the three-tier model versus the two-tier model, there's a fairly basic economic consideration of, maybe we don't want to give up the opportunity to earn the investment of JCCs at the leader level by only offering two tiers, as was shown on the prior slide. So this three-tier model gives us an opportunity to provide more services and earn more revenue in our work. So there's more to share about this configuration, but I don't want to get too deep before we have the opportunity to have the board ask questions about these two general structures. And Michael, anything you want to add in terms of color commentary on those two structures?
Well, I think what I would add is that, our first pass at this was to develop a two-tier model. As Brian mentioned, the goal is to include as many JCCs possible as participating with JCC Association in the movement. And so hence the affiliate partner concept, which did not exist pre-pandemic. You were either in or out. And this gives everybody an opportunity to be in. So that, I think, is an important point. The other point is that we, in presenting the two-tier model to the stakeholder advisory committee, the committee recognized that we already have a number of JCCs that are paying higher than what the two-tier model would be, and JCCs would simply potentially just reduce their dues. And so we went back to the drawing board and came up with a three-tier model that both offered more and at a cost that was not dissimilar from where many JCCs are even today, and certainly more were at pre-pandemic, and allowed the partner level to come down a little bit and make it more financially accessible. So that if you just look at the 14 million plus row, the partner level here is the plus level here is at 60,000, and the two tiers had to be at 75,000 in order for us to get to kind of modeling revenue that we could function with. So, I think as we did this, we wanted to show you the work and the thinking that went into this. But we strongly believe the three-tier model is the way to go and the way for us to really think about what we present at J Summit.
Michael, I want to add one point to add a little more color as well. I'm thinking back to when this project first kicked off, and I was talking to Michael and Jen and even Daron back at the beginning about the fact that I'd worked at American Express for a number of years, and they would ask me a lot about this concept of membership has its privileges. And I think what you see in these three tiers are not that the JCCA should turn into a credit card company, but there are hints of these three tiers. And the way it worked at American Express, it was not that the company was always trying to, quote, harass people and encourage people to move up a level and make you feel like the level you're at is not good enough and why can't you go up to another level. It was that what they were trying to offer people at each tier was so attractive that people on their own were opting in to go up a level and then maybe up another level because something that was offered there was so valuable that what they were going to get far outweighed that what they had to pay. And I think as this takes shape, getting the input of the field to say, what are those 3, 4, 5 things that, wow, if you could really hit home runs on these things, the value that we would get makes it a no-brainer to go up a level. So we're getting great stuff, and the association is also getting the revenue that it needs to continue operating.
Fran asked a question that might be worth just addressing about pre-pandemic, that some Jays that needed the help of the association the most couldn't afford it at all. And how do we address that here? You'll note the little asterisk at the bottom is we're actually going to look at how for really small Jays, those $2 million and under, we will come up with a modified structure that makes it more affordable. And you can also see that in the plus model, the percentage of operating revenue ranges like 0.25% to 0.6% mostly, as opposed to being 1%. So it's less expensive than it used to be. We will work out a way to be more inclusive of Jays that are just starting or Jays that are very, very small in order to be able to be as inclusive as possible. Looks like
Lots of hands.
Yeah, lots of hands. Steve Seiden.
Yeah, thank you. I just want to, it's almost following up on Jeff's comment. Have we quantified what the value difference is between the partner level, the JCC plus level, and the JCC leader level to really understand if there is a great enough of a delta to warrant it? I like the three, this concept, but the question is there really value between
Michael, let's go back to slide 16 for a second to poke at what Steve's saying.
Are you talking about value from the association's perspective or from a JCC's perspective?
I'm talking from a JCC's perspective.
Great.
Yeah. So I would say, Steve, the answer is roughly. If you look at some of the differences between the JCC plus column and the leader column, I would point to just a couple of areas in the third column, in the third row rather, around conference participation. The leader level comes with some registrations, so we can certainly quantify the value of that. We know there's real value there. going a couple rows down, the preferential access to Maccabi and some of the other signature events of the association. Arguably, there's real value there. And then also, I would draw your attention to the last row about a designated connection point within the association. For better or for worse, some of the feedback that Jeff and Carol and I got as we surveyed the field or talked with field is they weren't always sure who to reach out to at the association. So our hypothesis here is at the leader level, we could create a very clear, almost like a concierge for the JCC to help them connect with the right resources. So those are just a few of the things that are arguably fairly tangible in comparing the JCC plus level to the leader level in driving value.
I would also say when you get into the actual rates, Steve, that the rates we need to charge in a two-tier level, the increment, if you're at the three-tier level, is not that big to be at the leader level for what you're going to get, right? So that's, I think, part of where the advantage is.
Yeah, I was just
we
going
just
back
have
to
to-
when the JCC evaluates where they want to be now. You're going to look at what's the dollar that I'm going to save by going to the leader level, or the extra services I'm going to get to push people to that level, because that's where we want them. So.
Correct.
By the way, one more point I would just add, my final connection to my Amex days. When I was working in marketing and they came out with the Black Card, Amex had a sense of who of their card members was most likely to go for that card based on their spending habits. And I think the same thing would hold true. The association would have a sense of which of the J's might be in play to consider that level. And what Amex did is they went to those folks and they said, help us design the benefits of the Black Card. Help us understand the things that we should offer there that would be truly special. And from that came the idea of the concierge service that Black Card members said, when I call in the 800 number, I want to get the same person every time so that I have a relationship with that person knows my needs. And I think that is the beginning of that last line at the bottom about the designated member. So that's like an example of how you can, in partnership, come up with an idea that is truly valued by the very people who would use it.
Andy Eisenberg's had his hand up.
I'm concerned about how the largest JCCs are going to view this. I come out of the Boston JCC, and the issue that we always had to try to address from the board there was the fact that the JCC was large enough and had enough money to go elsewhere for services and had other options beside JCC Association. I don't know if you address this, whether you have feedback from the field, but I would wonder whether this structure might allow some of the largest JCCs to step down in the level of their membership, because some of the services that we're provided, they're going to go elsewhere. I know this happened in Boston when they were looking to do a search for the exec, and they hired an outside firm to do it rather than the JCC Association. So I think that some of this, for example, the affiliate level is probably a step forward in addressing some issues, but I don't know whether this is going to appeal to the largest JCCs, and they may actually see it as an option to reduce the level of their membership because they want to get services elsewhere.
It's very possible, Andy, and I would say we at the association need to be good salespeople. I mean, ultimately, we need to prove to the field that it would be worth their investment at any particular level. Brian Siegel's had his hand up for a while.
Thanks. I'll try and make this brief. Using the American Express analogy, I think there's something missing about the psychology of the stakeholder or partner level. I think that the majority of people who drive these decisions at JCCs are CEOs, and CEOs are leaders, and they want to be at the table for decision making. And I feel that an answer to someone who wants to complain about the association, we should be asking them to be at the stakeholder or partner level. And at that level, they are eligible to have a board seat, or they're treated as someone who's making a particular investment in the association and has a greater standing for leadership. So I would just ask you to consider that leadership, either board executive positions or others, are limited to people who have put a stake in the ground and made an investment, a particular investment in the association. And I would not particularly dumb down that cost even to the bigger execs. I think that's a big part of a lot of execs' decision-making, is what leadership role and what influence they can have on the organization.
Ruth?
Hi, thank you. This is all so great. I really appreciate everything here. How many J's, and maybe you already said this, but how many J's would you expect? I just want to focus on the affiliate member part for now. How many J's would you expect to either come to the table as an affiliate or might be there now? Do you have any idea?
But we're going to come to that sort of projection shortly.
Okay.
In the presentation.
So the idea here is to elevate the movement, right? With this new model. So I think, what I would just want to ask is, this expectation for the affiliate members to deliver on the programs as a JCC, right? So if you're part of the JCC movement, you're going to be receiving, you're going to be part of the JCC association. But I just want to know if we're going to have any expectation for how they deliver some of these services. And I just think that that's our work as the association, as we try and maybe move people up to these next tiers, is to make sure that when they have their, JCC preschool, that they're reflecting best practice. And I just kind of want to challenge us to make sure that that's part of these conversations when we have these new affiliate partners, that we're really working with them. And I think that that's part of this plan, but just wanted to plant that seed. And that's really it.
Leonard and then Stephen.
Let me defer to Steve first. He's
Okay.
my boss. So.
Okay. At the risk of personalizing this thing with respect to New York, I think while I certainly agree that having tiers for participation makes some sense, I think as a practical matter, this is going to put New York in a position where the participation will be at a more minimal level than a more optimal level, if I can put it that way. There are three problems. One of them is historical, and I'm not going to get into it now, but it's related to the relationship that the JCCs in New York have with UJ Federation, which is a very, very close relationship. And for many, many years, and I think the case is still the case, that when issues arise at JCCs, the first phone call goes to UJA. It doesn't go to JCC Association. And the association has never been able to change that paradigm. And I think that will play a role in terms of how the New York agencies react to this program and the numbers that are attached to it. Additionally, and Leonard can speak more specifically to that because they're his colleagues, and I know he's in touch with them. The agencies in New York are in touch with each other, and in a certain sense, have their own little relationship model that may not exist elsewhere in the country. Additionally, the amount of money that's being paid by the New York agencies now is so far below what the suggested prices are in this presentation that the chances that agencies are going to be moving with such a huge addition to the amounts that they're paying now to the numbers that are here based on the size of their budget, I think makes makes another problem for the engagement of the New York agencies. And I, for one, and I know Leonard agrees with the values that the JCC Association provides, and would love to see all of the New York agencies participate at a more intense level than they even are today. And I'm not talking money-wise, I'm talking participation-wise. But I think, as Andy has suggested with respect to what may happen at some of the larger agencies, in terms of what's going on in New York, I think this proposal is going to be very problematic. And it's not to say that what New York wants should dictate what the country wants. Far from it. I don't believe that at all. But I think it's certainly my responsibility to point out that the New York agencies, I believe, are going to have a big problem other than participating at the lowest levels here. Leonard, maybe you want to elaborate on that a little bit.
Ditto to what Steve said, and I would say this even if he wouldn't be my boss. So that's just. But in all seriousness, I do understand that New York JCC is an outlier. I understand we can be perceived as freeloaders, and there's definitely truth to that. On the other hand, there's a historical reality that Steve alluded to when UJ Federation used to subsidize our membership to the tune of $1 million. And then we all know it's sort of, there's still a grant from UJ Federation, nowhere near where it was. So it's a different relationship. And as my colleagues would say, look, our budget is what it is. But again, in New York, a lot of even suburban JCCs get government dollars. Shouldn't that be subtracted from the annual budget? We don't need to be treated differently, but my plea is to have some sort of conversation where it's just unfortunately what Steve again alluded to, we will lose even with the tier with the 3-tier system, which is much better than the 2-tier system. We will, unfortunately, it breaks my heart to say it, we will lose a lot of, or they will downgrade their membership to the meaningless affiliate partner where I don't need to pay anything. So why not? Last but not least, there's no easy solution to that. Being a better salesperson is akin to what my kid, who is a combat soldier in the IDF, was told by his commander yesterday. His foot is bruised, he cannot run, but the commander keeps on yelling, you need to run, you need to toughen up, I don't care. Well, so it's all wonderful, but the reality is the sticker price will be a real hurdle. It's a make it or break it moment.
I'm happy to just quickly chime in here. First, Leonard, let me just say that we all hope and pray that your son continues to be safe, most importantly. In response to the comments that Steve and Leonard made, I will just say here that Michael and I have talked about this at length. There is a strategy that will be needed directly to work with the New York Jays. There's a lot of historic stuff going on here. We will continue to have those conversations, and Leonard and Steve and others will be our partners in making sure that we do that as effectively as we can. I'm also beginning conversations directly with UJ Federation of New York. So we will look in, and by the way, New York is one region. There are other regions where I could say, or other pockets of our movement that I would say present challenge, present like a more unique need than sort of the whole. So that we don't go down a New York rabbit hole too deeply on this call, I will just say that we will continue to take that under strong advisement, and we understand and already know that that's going to require a different kind of strategy to engage.
Yeah, and I would just point out that what we heard loud and clear from the field is the importance of a fair, equitable, and transparent fee structure and way to participate with JCC Association, which we don't currently have. And you know, the goal, you know, and if we went back to the model in pre-pandemic, the New York JCCs may not be participating anyway. So it is to, I think from our perspective, everybody has to feel like everybody's carrying their weight to participate in a way that's fair for what they're getting. And then everyone's going to have to make a decision, and we're going to have to do our best to make it worth JCCs to participate. There were a couple questions about like, well, what does the revenue model look like if we play this out? And maybe we should, I think that's next, right, Brian?
Yeah, let's go ahead and go there.
There we go.
Yep. All right. So we have run forecasts and estimates on what the association might expect in revenue from these two scenarios that we just presented. You see a range of options on this slide, obviously both for the 2-tier and the 3-tier model. The key assumptions that drive the different levels, the low versus mid-range versus high, are mostly signaled in the red text. So you can see given the assumptions around the percentage of J's that choose, for example, the affiliate level versus the plus level, you land in these various ranges. So arguably, Michael, correct me if he thinks this is unfair, but in terms of if we had to pick a forecast of where we would land, obviously it's probably close to the mid-range, maybe between the mid-range and the high. And the important, I guess, one important takeaway from this is when you look at the results of the 2-tier versus the 3-tier, we do believe that the 3-tier approach does give us a higher probability of achieving greater revenue, which is a very important consideration for the association. That might be obvious on its face, but I wanted to draw attention to that. And it's one of the reasons why Michael said earlier, the committee's hypothesis is that we should really focus on the 3-tier option as we contemplate sharing these recommendations with the field at JSummit. Let's do one more slide, Michael, and then we can, again, pause for questions on this. So the next slide shows a bit of compare and contrast on the current revenue arrangement versus where we might land if we can get to the $4 million of revenue that the 3-tier model was showing on the last slide. So this is looking at the impact on the work of JCCA that's not directly grant funded. Okay, so we're taking out for this analysis the programs that are fully funded by a grant. And you can see that when you go down to the net bottom line, we are making a meaningful difference in terms of the size of the deficit. We're knocking, roughly $500,000 off of it, which is quite important. I doubt anyone would say that this is the finished point for the proposed budget. So closing the deficit over time will require additional assumptions around our contributed revenue and around our expenses. Those are shown in the paragraph on the right-hand side of the chart. And we can also think about the evolution over time of what we have historically called as the dues revenue. So the point of this slide is to show that we are making, the 3-tier model would make meaningful progress. It is not sufficient by itself, and that further work will be required to close the deficit.
And
so I'm sorry, go ahead, Michael.
We're not assuming that we're returning to the days pre-pandemic where dues were $5.5 million and 40% of the budget. Right. So we recognize, as Brian said, that we still have to expand our revenue streams and really take a hard look at our expenses in order to take our unrestricted operating budget to to at least a break-even point.
So questions about the revenue implications that we've looked at on the last couple of slides?
Lacey's got her hand up.
Okay.
Sorry, I cannot, there's no hand raise on the bottom of my thing. I've played with it 15 times. Can you just talk a little bit about what if people chose the fee-based situation, what are some of the fees that you're talking about charging? Just to have some idea of what, you know, because like obviously to Fran's point earlier, like the smaller JCCs need different, you know, things from us than the larger ones do.
What we've been looking at mostly is a difference in those things you could participate in as an affiliate, such as conferences, executive search, camp, J1 visas, things like that, that we would just have a price differential. Those are all fee-based as it is, but we would have a price differential between those who are committed to the plus level that are making a annual commitment to the association versus those that are not. So, you know, just as an example, right, this year, J Summit was $8.99 registration fee. So presumably it would be a lower registration fee for plus level and a higher registration fee for affiliate level, right? And whether that's the right number or not going forward doesn't matter. We charge our fee on executive search is 22% now. Maybe we would charge 25% if you were at an affiliate level, right? So we still want to be able to enable JCCs to participate in these programs, but we feel like those who are making a commitment to supporting the ongoing operation of the association should get a benefit.
Thank you. So it's the fee differential. It's not that they can just buy into things.
Correct. Correct.
Thank you.
Yeah. Phyllis.
Do we have, I mean, I don't like the word policing, but do we have a plan to, how are we going to actually police this? It's so easy to say to an organization that's calling, well, we'll just give you this rate or we'll just do that. And how, like, I feel as though when we're doing the fee for service and we're not just giving it away, it becomes really difficult to then have that conversation about fees for every single thing, both on the board side in terms of what we're charging, as that comes from staff, but then also professional to professional dealing with the field. So I just get a little concerned that we won't end up bringing in the revenue for the services that we're talking about charging for, just because it makes for a difficult conversation that our J's haven't really ever had to deal with that way.
In the projection, I'll go back to the previous slide. Whoops, sorry. So the assumptions built into the projections are that those who are at the affiliate level would participate in a certain number of conferences, right? And that we would generate a small amount of revenue from that. It's not a huge amount. And so ultimately, either you are paying at a plus or leader level, in which case you're going to get a whatever the fee is for that particular for a conference or whatever else. And if you're not at that, we know you're not at a quote unquote one of the membership levels, you're at an affiliate level, you're going to pay a different fee. That's all. We're going to know who's supporting the association and who's chosen to do it on an a la carte basis. Fran?
Yeah, are these fees for services based on the services JCCA presently offers? And do we have a list of services the local J's wished we offered, and we could build up a new series of things we provide?
It's a great question, Fran. We have not created the list. We could choose to offer more a la carte services. It's something we're going to have to look at, and we're going to have to consider the balance between The idea that the more you offer a la carte, the more JCCs may choose to opt out of an annual commitment and only buy a la carte. And what is that impact on the association's sustainability if we can't predict what the revenue will be? But right now we are very much at the conceptual level with all of this, and looking to J Summit to get even more feedback. And that's a great question for us to ask at J Summit. Like, what are we not offering that you might want? And I think that as we build this out between J Summit and the end of the year, when we have to present something to the board to be approved, we have to kind of dot a lot of I's and cross a lot of T's.
Well, an earlier side, when we were to vote on programs and how essential they are, there was a choice that said discontinue service. There was not a line which said add the following. So rather than thinking of it as an a la carte, I'm wondering at which point the movement and the board of JCCA take a look at the range of services and say, 5 or 6 years ago, we rejuggled this and we eliminated several things and concentrated in other areas. Should we be doing that again? And should the menu of choices be thrown up in the air and re-put together instead of doing more of the same?
That is actually exactly the concept of using this strategy screen to evaluate those things that we are currently doing, and look at what options we might have to do things that either we used to do and no longer do, or new things that have never been done. And recognizing that in order to add, at least where we are right now financially, we're going to have to subtract, right? We can't just add to what we do and without there being funding associated with it. But I agree with you that we need to evaluate the things that are currently in our program portfolio, and decide, are all of those things that JCC associations should still be doing? And be able to come to the board and say, here's some things we've been doing that we don't think we should be doing anymore. And here are things that we think we might replace that with.
Michael and Sandy, I think one of the areas we were curious to get feedback from the board on today, and you can weigh in on whether now is the right time to do it, is the question of, in terms of what we share with the field at J Summit, for simplicity purposes, it might be beneficial to really just focus on the 3-tier option and gather feedback on that. Or, of course, we could share both the 2 and the 3-tier and get feedback on the pros and cons of each. But now may be a good time to weigh the board's sentiments on that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. I maybe what I would do is ask the board if anyone perceives any benefit in the 2-tier model over the 3-tier model, because I think that we've heard, a great explanation, and all the questions have sort of focused otherwise, that it seems to me that there's a consensus. I'm sensing a consensus that of the two, we understand from the New York folks that this is problematic. We understand that, and there are probably others who share a concern about the general framework, and there's more to discuss. That's why we're not making a final decision today. But in terms of going to J Summit, I'm getting a consensus that the 3-tier model is the way to approach it. And if someone doesn't think that's the case, I'd love to hear it. Michael.
Hi, Sandy. First of all, terrific job to you and the team. This is the first key presentation I've seen in such a long time that focuses on the value from the outside in perspective, meaning the field's perspective, our client's perspective. But I would offer this, and I may be in a minority. I think the key goal at J Summit is to get feedback, is to, see what sticks and see what, perhaps brings a more visceral reaction. And with that in mind, I don't have a problem with presenting both models, because I think it's obviously less binary and you're apt to get a lot more discussion out of the execs and the board chairs. One person's opinion.
Appreciate that.
Other feedback?
Val has his hand up.
I kind of think that exactly the opposite. I don't think that I would give the larger group a choice. I think that if you give the larger group the choice, they'll opt for whichever one they think will cost them the least amount of money. And I don't think that helps you. I think that we should decide with this group which we think makes more sense, and then present that to the large group at J Summit for opinions.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Lacey's got her hand up without her hand up.
Right. Right. Like I need my kids here. What can I tell you? So let me just talk to J Summit for a little bit, because I probably have I can give everybody a little bit more of a better idea of what the ideas and plans are for it. So for all of those who have participated in the 1,700 open sessions we've had for everybody, you know that we are our opening plenary is going to be Rabbi Cosgrove opening, talking about the movement. And then we are going to shift into the power of partnerships. And we're doing that with Mark Shapiro from Milwaukee leading us in J Talks. And we're going to be doing 2 J Talks. And then Sandy is actually going to get on the main stage and talk about this. So he will present what we are anticipating, not as a statement of fact, but as an open place to say, this is what our thoughts are. And then after every breakout, after every plenary, both I think in J-Town Square and in not J-Town Square, we are going to have 2 open sessions for anybody to come to do exactly what you all are talking about, to give feedback, to have conversation, so that it is a give and a take the whole way through. Now, what Sandy presents, I guess you all are commenting on now, but there is the dialogue planned for J Summit that is open and available multiple times for people to participate in.
Thanks.
Anybody else opinions on showing both models or just the 3-tier? Fran?
I was wondering about this board's participation at the individual sessions at J Summit. Do you see it as a plus to have us there as either full participants or silent partners listening to feedback? Or are we going to hear just what we're hearing now, and so it's duplicative and we should go do something else?
I don't think we know the feedback we're going to get from the field, and we're hoping that we will get a lot of really good questions and opinions about this model. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the board being in touch with hearing what the field has to say. And so while it will be offered multiple times, I don't think you have to go to all of them.
Thanks.
Ryan.
Thanks. If my only recommendation as it relates to presenting 3 and 2 is, if you took a straw poll of this board and it was 95% 3, I wouldn't present 2 at J Summit. I think that would not be it would be a false front. So I don't know if that consensus exists, but hypothetically, if it did, I wouldn't present both.
Steve?
Yeah, I would present the 3, but I'm concerned with the type of feedback you're going to get. Many lay leaders don't know what they're paying and don't know what services they're getting. And I think you almost have to segment the feedback from lay leaders in one group and the execs and COOs in another feedback, because the latter, I think, is really where the feedback is going to be very important, because they're going to influence and sell it to their boards.
This is David. I don't have a hand raising thing. I'm on a phone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
This is David Begelfer from Boston. I'm a little concerned about the opportunity for feedback from the JCC execs. We're offering them the opportunity to come to a open forum session, but there are competing interests, and I'm not sure we're going to necessarily get, the people we want to be there to hear. So my question is a little bit more on the follow-up from after this. I think it's very critical for us to get certain strategic, you already may have spoken to some of the execs, obviously, before this, but I do think a follow-up afterwards with very targeted selection of execs where we can talk about this whole issue, which I think is so vital, and that is, what is of value to you? What is something that really gets your juices going and makes you want to go up a level? Though that kind of input is, I think, critical, and I don't want to count on it just be coming from who happens to wander into an open session. I think it's going to be very important to get more feedback from key participants during, if you can, as a sidebar for some of these people, or afterwards, to really focus in on what is critical to them.
Yeah, David, we recognize that and plan on lots of outreach, and we are offering these sessions 3 times during J Summit. So that everyone will have an opportunity to stop in at least once. Don?
Based upon the third level representing somewhere between 2/3 and 3/4 of your revenue, I think you better know before you put anything on the floor that those 14 centers are signed up.
Okay.
Okay.
The thoughts?
Eddie?
We have.
Sandy, we do have one more slide on next steps,
Okay.
and regarding the question of how we follow up and engagement with folks. It might be helpful to cover that last slide before we draw the discussion to a close.
Yeah, although but even before we get there, I think to the extent that trying to resolve this issue of what is presented, to the extent that I've heard from Michael, the idea that presenting the 2 may stimulate greater conversation than presenting just the 1. I still have the sense of listening and seeing the chat that this group thinks that there's a consensus of presenting one of them, but I just want to come back to Michael because I want to respect his opinion. That I think the same way on what we had on this board call today. One thing I'm not worried about is people having an opinion and wanting to share it. Like I don't see that happening. And I also see that that I also can imagine that that out of the excuse me, the conversation about a 3-tier model, someone could actually lead to a two-tier model. It's unlikely that a conversation at J Summit that's going to take place is going to lead the other way around. So if people are comfortable with it, and again, I don't want to put words in anybody's mouth or any of that, then it seems to me that what we're saying, and again, I want to be very, very clear, as we all have tried to be through this entire call. This is not a final decision about the way this will play out. This is our making a recommendation, and we can do this one of 2 ways, and we can here we may go to the final slide. This does not necessarily have to be this. The board is recommending this. That this can be that the board has. We just want to make sure we're not presenting something that the board hasn't seen and understands. In other words, we can present this as a way that our stakeholder paradigm committee, because we have more work to do once this is done. And so presenting at the J Summit that we've reviewed it and we believe this is a great way to go. However we want to phrase it, we can phrase it any way we want. And to stimulate the best conversation, get the greatest involvement, and then do all the other things that people were talking about in terms of follow-up afterwards, because there's still much work to be done. But to the end of the specific of what we present at J Summit, again, I don't want to push it and put words in anybody's mouth, but it seems to me that the consensus is let's go with presenting the 3-tier and then build off of and address all the other issues that we're talking about here today.
Hey, Sandy, it's Mike again. Look, I have no problem. I think the key, as I mentioned earlier, is feedback in whatever form. If we presented this as a decision has been made, you're unlikely to get it. If we present it as the consensus of the JCCA board recommends, you're likely to get it. So it's all about getting the feedback in whatever way is best.
Yeah, and in fact, I would ask David and the board, I'm not even sure you have to say this is what the board is saying. What we do have to say is that we've been reviewing this and the committee is still working, and this is where we are on this. That's a decision I would, I'd leave to the board about whether you want this to be something that the stakeholder paradigm committee that's been working on this is saying this, and we understand, we've talked to them, we think there's a lot of merit to it, and we want to talk about it at J Summit, or the other, which is say, we've talked about it and we would like to, float this as an idea. That's a decision for this group, and I leave that to David. That's outside the purview of our committee. We're happy to do it, of course, either way.
And I'd like to add, Sandy, to that, even at J Summit, we have, whatever I said, 314, 315 participants coming, representing 88 JCCs. We would like to have input perspective from 172 JCCs. So it's also imperative that beyond just J Summit, that we do a communications role to kind of get that input and figure that out, whatever that takes.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Thank you.
For sure.
All right. Well, I have seen a number of folks send their regrets and mentioning they have to sign off. So why don't we talk a little bit about our anticipation of what happens after J Summit, and then we can have any closing comments. So the slide that Michael's just added to the screen shows what we anticipate having to do following J Summit. Obviously, the input that we get in Chicago will be of tremendous value. We can also make additional outreach on a sort of one-off basis after that to catch folks who are not able to offer their feedback at the conference itself. But there are a couple of key activities here that I would draw the board's attention to. The first one is in number one, the completion of that strategy screen process that we looked at about an hour ago. I would also point out in step 3 the importance of just making sure our emerging thoughts on this connect with the search process. There are implications for the work of the association and the attributes that will be most beneficial for us to have in our next leader. I would also highlight in step 5 the opportunity for the governance committee of the board to reflect on potential updates to the role of the board or the board execs. In Jeff's presentation, he highlighted some opportunities there. Those are arguably beyond the purview of the committee that worked on the stakeholder project, but would be very appropriate for the governance committee to think about. And then finally, I would draw your attention to step number 7 and our expectation that we would officially adopt a new structure for the January meeting so that all of the practicalities associated with the new membership or dues structure could be put into motion. Good. I just go one more slide, Michael, and we can end as we began with the 4 Ps. So while there's always, or I would say there's inevitably attention and focus on the dues structure, and it's certainly a topic that's on the minds of many JCCs, we wanted to just take this opportunity to underscore the importance of the real work and the potential to enhance the value proposition that JCCs have in connecting with one another and in being an integral part of the association. appreciate everybody's consideration in hearing the committee's recommendation. I am going to turn things over to Sandy for any closing comments and final thoughts.
Well, thank you, Brian, and of course, thank you, Brian and Jeff and Carol, for all of your work to get here. I just want to say one thing and then turn it to David, since it's a board meeting, and take it from here. What I think Brian just mentioned very quickly, I think is a very important point we need to make at J Summit and to others. The issue of the revenue, which is where everybody seems to focus attention, for understandably, is only one piece of the puzzle. Right. Our challenge here is how we build this movement, how we find the stakeholders and we build the strongest movement possible. How do we help every individual JCC do the best that they can do? And how collectively can we help the JCC movement move a Jewry forward? That's what this is about. Where we're focused on the revenue is just one part of it. It's an important part, but it's one part. And so when we get to the summit, we want to talk about all these other issues. And if we, as we've said since the very first, if we get the larger vision right, we get the 4 Ps and the larger vision that Zach talked about. If we get that right, we'll get the revenue process right, because we will be adding value to organizations and contributing to contemporary Jewish life. It's that simple. So while this is important and the details are very important, let's make sure when we get to Chicago, we keep in mind that what we're trying to do is this big picture, and that this revenue piece is only one part of it, so that we don't overemphasize it. We make sure that we emphasize what the goal here is. And the goal here is the strongest JCC movement possible to help make a stronger Jewish world and help to make a better world at large. So thank you. And to David, I'll let you take it from here.
Well said, Sandy. I just want to really pass along my thanks to you, to Jeff, to Brian for spearheading this process. And obviously, I always speak about the voices, and a lot of effort has been put forth to invite the voices to participate. And it's been process also with going back and forth between the voices and the various communities that make up what the JCC is all about. So, and the association and our work and the movement. And, here we have 4 Ps. I kind of grew up in our sales process with the idea of 3 Ps with everything: a purpose, a process, and a payoff. And you could rotate those things to where sometimes the payoff is the beginning, and then you go through the purpose and the process. So finding our way, working through it. We have this opportunity here in 11 days, 12 days to get more input. We need to also, as I said earlier, communicate with those who don't participate, because the intention is that when we come to January of this process and all that so much thought and input has been put into this that we really have buy-in from throughout the movement. That is our intention. That's the overall payoff of what it is. Now, I was talking to Leonard the other day, and I was saying, is it going to be 100% right? I can't speak to that. I don't think my mother would get 100% approval in anything, so it's the idea of a very thoughtful process, a meaningful process to get to an outcome that we can all very well be proud of, that we put the time into it, and that we created this new opportunity to not only look at what the revenue model is that, fuels our work together for the JCC Association, but also go back to that idea of the alignment that was spoken about. So I will leave it at that. And I thank all of you for participating. Sandy, I know, is available for any follow-up conversations from here, and we will continue this dialogue as we move forward with anything. And before I turn it loose, I'll ask Jen if she has any comments that she would like to add on to this.
Thank you. Only that this meeting has been very gratifying. We've been waiting for this input and feedback, and it's incredibly helpful. I have a lot of notes. I know Michael does too. I want to just echo all the thanks, and Sandy, gratitude to you for your leadership and everything that you've done to keep driving this forward. We cannot wait to see all of you in Chicago, my friends. Lisi, thank you, my dear, for all you've done to get us there. It's really going to be a phenomenal, phenomenal few days. We can't wait to be together.
And
Travel safe, everyone.
And I want to also come back to thanking Michael for all of his efforts, involvement, and the leadership from this process. And today he was the musician on keyboards. So thank you for your efforts with that. So, all right. With that, I'd like to adjourn the meeting and wish you all well. And we will all see you shortly. So thank you for today. Take care.
See you all in Chicago. Take care.